Guys, the creek is up. We had a buttload of rain yesterday. It's actually gone down some from where it was, but man, was it crazy. All right, today I'm gonna try to fix those brake lines on the Excursion. All right, guys, there she is. Been featured in one of my other videos before, but this is my 2000 Ford Excursion 7.3 Power Stroke diesel in it. Lots of modifications to the truck, small lift kit, oversized tires. It is still stock injector, stock turbo, but what I've done is a lot of the supporting mods. But before we get into that, let's get this started up and moved over into the shop so I can start working on those brake lines today. All right, guys, I got it moved over to the shop, and as you can see, my shop is very small, so I don't get the whole truck in there. So I had to get it really close to the wall on this side. Not touching, but it's really close. That way I can still get my door open enough to get out on this side. But yeah, still not a lot of room. You can see from the inside of the shop, it gives me enough room to get to the front of it and do what we need to do. Now, this truck has been sitting since February, as I mentioned in an older video, because of the brake line issue, and it had a coolant leak. Of course, it's been sitting here getting mold and mildew on it, so we're going to try and get those things fixed so I can put this truck back on the road. I hate that I haven't driven it in 4 months. I love driving this truck. It's actually one of my favorites. So let's see what we do to get this thing fixed. I know my shop here is actually really small, and it's not the most conducive for working on these big trucks. It's really set up for working on motorcycles because that's what I've primarily done here. When I am working on a car, it's for my personal stuff. I don't really work on cars for a living to make any money. Before we get started this job, I want to show you guys something that I think is really cool. This is a jack system that was my grandfather's, and when he passed, I took possession of it, and he had this ever since I was a little kid. So it's easily from at least the late 60s, early 70s, not positive, but it's called a Gray's jack. It's an airlift system that you can hook on the frame. They were widely used back when cars and trucks still had big heavy-duty steel bumpers. So you could just hook it underneath the front of the car and lift the car or truck up. And with the Excursion and the dually, I've got these nice hooks on the front of them, so it comes in real handy to using that. Let me show you how it works. So this is the jack. It has a 5,000 pound capacity at 200 PSI. I've already got the feet, or the grabbers, whatever you want to call them, spaced out so that they can hook onto the front tow hooks. And then we can just lift the truck up. So we've got an airline going to it, and there's a valve here where I can press the valve, and it goes up. So you see I've got it pretty much set. Just go slow. Make sure both sides are hooked properly. Air compressor's at full capacity. So we just go up. And it will pick both wheels up off the ground at the same time, even in this big heavy diesel engine application. And then it's got a lock right here, so I can set it back down on the lock. Both tires are up off the ground, just barely on this big truck. Off the ground, so I can work on it. All right, guys, so what we're going to be replacing today is going to be this rubber line. And you can see right up here where it meets the hard line, goes through that bracket, from here down to the caliper is the piece we're going to replace. Let me show you what we're going to replace it with. So here we have the Russell steel braided brake line kits, DOT approved for the 4-wheel drive F250 and F350 from 1999 to 2003. Pick the Russell Performance because they've got a really good name in the industry. I chose steel braided because you get much better braking response than you do with a rubber hose. And the best way I can explain it is when you press the pedal in the truck and it's forcing that fluid through the lines down to the brake caliper to give you that clamping force on the rotor, the rubber hoses can actually expand a little bit. So some of that energy that you were trying to get to the rotor gets used up on those hoses. And the steel braided lines are less likely to expand under those hard pressures. Therefore, that energy gets transferred into the caliper, the pad, and the rotor assembly, and it actually gives you better braking power. And in some cases, it's a very noticeable difference. Back in the motorcycle racing days, we put steel braided brake lines on every single motorcycle that went on the track, and 90% of the ones that stayed on the street because it's just that much better. And this kit wasn't really all that expensive, so it's not much more expensive than it would have been to go buy the factory replacements from Ford. So let me get this unboxed and I'll show you what's in the box. Guys, so I got the kit opened up and you can see here it is a 5-line kit and it has all the new crush washers. So you've got the left front, the right front, the center rear that comes from the hard line down to the axle, and then at each end of the rear axle you've got a left and a right. And apparently these are identical because they are not labeled left or right, just rear outer and rear center. So it looks like it comes with everything you need. It's got a fairly complete instruction kit. All right, guys, this should be a relatively simple installation. It's, you know, take the old ones off, bolt the new ones on, and of course we have to bleed the system. The only thing that may cause a little bit of complication is that there has been some rust issues with this truck. We do get salt on our roads up here in the winter. Not as bad as the Northeast and stuff like that, but we do get some, and the truck is 21, 22 years old. So there are some rust issues, but hopefully we won't have too much trouble with it. But let's get started and see how it goes. And I'd also like to note that this kit is designed, like I said, for the 4x4 truck, specifically with a 4-inch to a 5.5-inch lift, somewhere in that range, which is right about where we're at. So this should be the perfect kit for this truck. Guys, so back over at the left front, here you've got the banjo bolt that goes through the mounting block here. There's a 14mm. You've also got the ABS wire that was attached right here. Now the new lines do not come with these keepers, so we are going to have to just zip tie the ABS wire back to the new ones, but for now we're just going to move that out of the way. And then up here you've got the actual brake line fitting, which is an 11mm. And then the only other thing holding on is there's a clip right here that actually clips this whole hose assembly right here into this bracket. Now the bracket remains on the truck. 1 bolt, retainer clip, the metal retainer clip, and the line. So all that's got to be removed in order to remove the brake line. Now I am going to unscrew the fitting here from the hard line to the rubber line first while all this is attached. That way the whole system has some support. Then I will move down and remove this one. And then we'll pull that clip out last, remove the hose, reinstall the new one. When you're working with brake lines and other things like that, it's best to get a set of actual line wrenches. They've got a slightly different shape to the head. They're less likely to slip off of those nuts because they're actually a very soft metal, and you're less likely to do any damage there. So this 11mm fit really good. And just so you know, if you don't have an 11mm, but you do have a 7/16, they are the same exact size. All right, guys, and on that clip, I bent it down just a little bit so you can see better, but you've got to get the spring tension up over that piece, and then grab a hold of it, and you can pull it out. The old brake line is out. Let's get that new one and put it in. Now, the new brake lines come with a slightly different type of clip. It's just got a regular E-clip type on there, rather than the spring clip that was on the old setup. Guys, and off camera, I took the original banjo bolt, went over to my wire brush on my bench grinder and just cleaned it up a little bit. Make sure to check the port in and out for obstructions, blew some brake clean through there to make sure it's good. So I've got the new crush washer on here. And go through the mounting block, get the second crush washer on it, and we'll tighten this down. I know I said tighten it down, but it's just finger tight. That way I can move it or take it back out if I need to. But I wanted that orientation to be right so that I could loop this the way it needs to be to put this part right back up in here, like so. All right guys, so we got the new line connected at both ends, and I did find something that I don't like about this kit. If you look at the end of the factory brake line, you see it is a hex design. If you look at the bracket there, it's got a hex in it. So when this goes up into that bracket, it stops it from being able to rotate. And then the clip that goes into the groove stops it from being able to come out. On the new brake line kit, everything here is round. So even once it goes up in there, there's nothing to really stop it from rotating very well. And if you look at this little bevel that's on here, it's almost like a dimple die. And then you look, there's two grooves in this piece. Well, because of that dimple die, I can't get it in the first groove. I can only go into the second groove, and that leaves a lot of slop. Let me get the clip in and show you guys. So it's back in there, and you can see there's still just a little bit of wiggle to it. I mean, it's secure, it's not going anywhere. It's just not as nice as the factory setup would have been. I've got the ABS wires zip tied all in. Not super fond of how that looks. Yeah, I wish they would have put a provision here like the factory did for the clips for the ABS line to hook to. That would have been nice, but all right, this side's done. Let's move to the next side. Guys, I got the passenger side done now. It actually went a lot easier than the driver's side did. One, I've got a little bit more room up here to work because part of the inner fender has already been cut out. So it wasn't as much of a fight for me. And obviously doing one, you kind of get a rhythm and know exactly what tools you need to make it fast. So I've still got to do the rear brake lines, but before I do, I have to put the wheels back on the front, turn the truck around, back it into the shop so I can get the back end up in the air to do the same thing. And before I do that, I need to bleed some of the air out of the system we just put in there so that I have brakes to move it around. So we're gonna move to that step next. Hey guys, I wanna show you a little trick I do when I'm bleeding brakes. Clear plastic hose, put over top of the bleeder nipple with a zip tie to hold it tight, crack the bleeder open, and you'll see the fluid will rise up. No matter what, the air goes to the top. Even when you're pumping the brake system, you'll pump all the air out, and then I just have a little catch over here to catch whatever runs out of it. Right there, then that'll drip into that pan. Essentially, when you're bleeding brakes, you're just trying to get all of the air out of the system because air does not compress at the same rate that a fluid does. Let me correct that. Fluids do not compress at all. You can pressurize them, you cannot compress them. There is a difference. Only gases can be compressed. So air is a gas, brake fluid is a fluid, it's a liquid, so you cannot compress it, but the air will. So when you press that pedal, if there are air bubbles in there, they will actually compress and take up less space, whereas the fluid will not. You can pressurize it, but you cannot compress it. It will always take up the same amount of space regardless of the amount of pressure that is on it. So that's why you get that spongy feeling in your brakes. By using this system, that air comes to the top no matter what. You don't have to keep opening and closing the bleeder so often. This makes it really easy when you're trying to do it by yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and go open up the other side as well and get a hose put on it. And that way all the air will just self-gravity feed out of this system. All right, guys, I'm going to show you that system again here on the driver's side because I haven't opened the bleeder yet. So you've got the pan in place and the pan is dry. The hose all goes up. Just got it kind of hanging on a little hook there. And it goes back down to the bleeder assembly. Now, once I open that bleeder, you'll see the fluid start coming out. And there you go. You can see I'm going to hold the camera still. You can see the fluid rising up. That is because the weight of the hydraulic fluid that's in the brake system that's up in the master cylinder is pushing down, forcing all the air up and through that tube. And once the tube fills all the way to the top, it'll start going back down and dripping, but air can't come back in. It's a fast, easy way to get all the air out of the system. What's really neat about this system is, let's say you just put new brake fluid in a system, but somehow you still got air in it and you don't want to lose that new fluid in the bleeding process. You can actually take those hoses, and I've done this before, route it all the way up top and have them where they drip right back into the master cylinder. So you're just recirculating the fluid in there, but all the air comes out of the system. Saves you some money if you're short on fluid. Okay, so I let those sit for a few minutes open, let the tubes fill up. Pretty confident that most of the air, if not all of it, is completely out of the system. Enough that I can put the wheels back on the truck and flip it around and do the back. And then when I'm done, I'll do a final bleed on everything just to make sure. But I didn't want to try moving the truck around without any brake pressure. So I felt the pedal, it all feels pretty good. So let's get this flipped around. All right, guys, and if you can, as you can see here, the back is really simple, much shorter lines, but going from the caliper just over to the hard line, basically the same process, same principle. And then there's going to be a center one over there that comes off of the frame rail and runs down to the distribution block here. So let's get this started. Just a quick note. This is set up a little different because this isn't held in a secured keeper. It's just kind of this little wire that comes off of the rear end housing. I had to use a 17mm wrench. I'm sorry, it's a 16mm wrench to hold the brake line steady while I broke this nut loose. Once it's loose, it's fine, but you don't want to just force that one open because it'll cause the line to twist and break. So you want to hold the bigger one secure as you loosen the smaller one. Other than that, the sides are the same. That's still the 11mm, and down here is still the 14mm. Got it. All right, guys, so I got it loose at the caliper. I've also got it loose up here. The only thing left is there's a 10mm bolt right here that holds the whole assembly to the rear end housing. All right, there we go. There's the whole brake line assembly off the truck. As I mentioned earlier in the video that the rears were just labeled rear outer, rear center. They weren't labeled left or right. So I thought they were kind of universal the way that these brackets swiveled on them. But sure enough, they are left and right specific. So as I lay it out here, you can see that these brackets mirror each other. So this will be the left side and this will be the right side. So it comes with a bracket, so you're not going to reuse that hoop, but you will need to reuse the bolt. So let's go get that installed. All right, with the new bracket in place, we'll just tighten this down. There we go. Now this is still able to swivel, so I can get this side lined up exactly how I want it. And they mentioned in the instructions that these are designed to give you higher off-road clearance. So I think it's going to come up like so and then bolt on right there. Okay guys, and pretty simple, it's all installed. One thing I did note is the nut on the new brake line is not a 16, it is an 18. So you have to have both size wrenches to do that. But it's on, it's good and secure. Let's move to the other side. So now the right side rear is done. Same process, no different. In real time, to do both of the rear brake lines, the left and right, once the truck was jacked up and the wheels were off, it really was only about 10 minutes. I know it looks faster on video, but in actual real time, 10, maybe 12 minutes to replace those lines. It actually went pretty easy. Now, so I got to get under there and do that center one, and I don't know if there'll be room to film, but we'll check it out and see. All right, guys, so the back center one looks a lot like the front. As you can see here, there's a fitting there. So I've got the line coming in, and then the hose is supported by the bracket, so we have to break this loose, and there's another spring clip holding this assembly to the bracket. And then when it comes down to the axle, it's got the block on it, and we got the two lines coming out left or right that go to left or right. So this should be pretty simple to change out as well. But go ahead and get started on it. I don't know that I'll be able to hold the camera up here and film, but let's get it done. Okay guys, so I got the assembly out of the truck. Here is the old hose. This is the part that goes to the rear end housing. See the hole there? That is the mount. This stud, which is a hollow stud, is what actually secured it to the housing. And this is where the vent hose, which I have here also, would then click onto that barb. And then this end runs up top to the frame. This just allows the rear to breathe. And then you got the top end, which is the line. It's pretty simple to get out. Only about 2 or 3 minutes to remove it. So now I'm going to go put the new one back in. All right, guys, so that new line is in, running up. Now we did have a little bit of trouble with getting that back in. The line came out really easy, but getting the driver side hard line to go back into that block, it was tough getting it out. I mean, it was, there was a lot of resistance on it the whole way threading it out. So when to go put it back in, I just could not get it started. I fought with it for 10 or 15 minutes. I flipped the line over and put the other end threaded in just fine. So I realized there was something boogered up on the end of that compression fitting on the hard line. That was the original line to the truck. So had to break out my tap and die set and clean up the threads on it. And then it all went back together pretty easy after that. So must have just been some dirt and grime that was in there, and it just boogered up the threads just enough coming out that I couldn't get it to restart. So guys, now all there is, put the wheels back on, bleed the system, and it should be ready to rock and roll. All right, as you can see, I've got my little hose trick rigged up again on both sides. However, because I've got the back of the truck jacked up so high, the master cylinder is no longer the highest point in the system, so it's not going to properly gravity feed. So I'm going to go ahead and lower the back of the truck down. That way that air can get out of the system, and go check, make sure I still got enough fluid up in the master cylinder to have enough weight to push it down. Guys, are right there. You can see the fluid starting to come out a little bit, slowly rising. Same thing on the passenger side. All right, guys, so I let it sit here and just gravity feed for a couple of minutes, and then with the bleeder still open, I went up front and I pressed the brake pedal a number of times and cycled all the fluid out. And you can see how much fluid I've got here in the pan. But as you see, when you release the pedal and that fluid comes back down, because the fluid level is so high up here, it's way up here, that it doesn't allow it to draw any air back in. So now I'm going to go ahead and lock these down, and I'll go back and I'm going to re-bleed the fronts again just to make sure that they were all good, because you always want to start from the furthest point from the master cylinder. So technically that would be the right rear, and then you would do the left rear, and then the right front, and then the left front. But I'm doing both rears at the same time, so we're eliminating that the way I've got this, because I got the same hose set up, hooked up on both sides of the truck to do them both simultaneously. All right, everybody, I also want to just mention a couple of the products that I used in making this video. So I used the Amsoil MP. The MP stands for Metal Protector. This is a great penetrating oil and lubricant. And I used it on a couple of the little rusty fittings and stuff like that that I knew were going to give me some trouble coming loose, and it made it definitely easier. Amsoil also makes a brake and parts cleaner. Works very, very well. Leaves no residue, safe for brake parts, and I even use it for doing electrical connectors sometimes. And then, of course, The AMSOIL brake fluid, DOT 3 and 4, higher boiling point than most brake fluids. It is, once again, 100% synthetic product. And because it's 100% synthetic, it lasts longer and works better than most of the other items on the market. Well, guys, this is the second video I've done on YouTube with the Excursion in it, which I'm calling Project X. So I hope you guys liked it. But if you want to know more about this project, let me know. I've done a lot of modifications to this truck over the years, mostly mild supporting mods in preparation to do some high performance stuff. So if you guys have any questions about anything that's been done to it, let me know. I do plan on having it in more upcoming videos because I have a lot that I want to do to this truck. Again, time and money, don't know when I'll get to all of it, but I'd really like to do some more stuff to it. So leave a comment if you want to know more about the truck. I can do a whole video on just the truck and what's been done to it. All right, guys, that about sums it up for this video. As I was moving the truck out of the shop so I can clean up my tools and my mess, I could tell that the brakes definitely feel so much firmer than they did before. Now, there is no coolant in the truck at all, so I can't actually take it out and do a road test, so that's gonna have to wait till later. Because I do have that coolant leak I still have to fix on there. So we're not done with it. That's just done with the brake lines. It seems to have worked very, very well. So I'm going to clean up all my tools and clean up my mess. So I'm going to go inside and have some lunch. And when I come back out, I will probably start doing the coolant leak repair, but I don't know that I'm going to video that. So this is probably going to close out the video for today. So thank you for watching. Give me a big thumbs up if you liked the video, and please share with your friends and family and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And until the next time I see you, you keep those engines running.